In a small lively village, there lived a young woman named Nandi. She was unlike anyone the village had ever known. Nandi's beauty was the first thing people noticed. Her deep brown eyes, smooth skin, and a well neatly braided hair. But what truly made Nandi special was her mind. From a young age, Nandi had been curious about everything. Her father, a humble farmer, taught her to read using old scrolls and stories he had collected. She devoured every word, filling her mind with knowledge about herbs, riddles, and the world beyond the village. But this brilliance was not always celebrated. She's wasting her time. Kofi, the village's best hunter, would say loudly in the market square. Kofi was lanky and confident, known for his sharp tongue and even sharper spear. A woman's place is to cook, clean, and marry. What good is all her reading? That is what Kofi says. Some villagers laughed, but others were unsure. Deep down, they admired Nandi, though they were afraid to admit it. But Nandi never let their words touch her heart. The village square was alive with its usual bustle, women pounding yams, children darting between market stalls, and men trading stories over calabashes of palm wine. The sun blazed high overhead, casting golden light on the scene, but the peace was short-lived. "Help!" A cry pierced the air, silencing the hum of daily life. Heads turned as a young man, his feet bare and his chest heaving, stumbled into the square. His face was pale with exhaustion, and his clothes clung to his sweat-drenched skin. "Our village!" he gasped, collapsing to his knees. "A sickness is spreading. People are dying. The chief, he promises to reward anyone who can find a cure." Chaos erupted. Women wailed, clutching their children to their chests. Men shouted over one another, their voices heavy with fear and frustration. It felt as though the village itself was trembling under the weight of the news. Then came the sound of Kofi, cutting through the noise like the crack of a whip. "I will save them," he declared, stepping forward. His frame, lanky yet commanding, cast a long shadow in the midday sun. His confident smirk spread across his face as he puffed out his chest. "My auntie's skills will guide me to the cure," he continued. "I don't need books or riddles to solve this. Let the men handle it." A roar of agreement rose from the crowd. The other men rallied behind him, eager to prove their bravery. Tools clinked as spears were gathered, and the square buzzed with excitement. But under the baobab tree, away from the commotion, sat Nandi. Her brown eyes followed the scene, her expression calm and unreadable. While the men marched out of the village with loud fanfare, Nandi remained in a quiet corner. She tilted her head, watching them go. Something gnawed at her heart. "They are rushing," she whispered to herself, her fingers tracing the edges of her journal. This isn't about strength, it's about understanding. The days that followed felt like a heavy cloud had settled over the village. One by one, the men returned, their shoulders slumped and their faces shadowed with defeat. Kofi was the last to return. His spear, once carried with pride, dragged behind him like a burden, too heavy to bear. He threw it to the ground in frustration. "Nothing worked," he said. "We tried everything." The sickness crept closer, like an unseen beast stalking its prey. Coughs echoed through homes, and feverish murmurs filled the air. Mothers knelt beside their children, pressing cool clothes to their foreheads. Elders whispered prayers under their breath, their eyes heavy with worry. Even the neighboring chief, once proud and dignified, now wandered the village like a shadow of himself. Nandi watched it all unfold. Her mind was a storm of thought, piecing together fragments of knowledge she had read in her grandmother's old scrolls. Fever, weakness, coughing, it was all familiar. Then, like the dawn breaking over the horizon, she remembered. "There is a plant," her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, warm and wise. "It grows by the river and blooms under the full moon. It's yellow, yellow flowers. All the power to heal the gravest of ailments." Her heart raced. Was this the answer? Could it be so simple? But doubts crept in a shadow over her thoughts. What if she was wrong? What if the plant didn't work? That evening, as the village prepared for another restless night, her father sat beside her by the fire, his face, lined with years of wisdom and toil, studied her carefully. "Nandi," he said softly, his voice breaking the stillness, "I see something in your eyes. You found the answer, haven't you?" She hesitated. "I think I have, Baba. But what if I fail? What if they blame me?" Her father reached for her hand, his grip steady and reassuring. "You have always been brave, Nandi. Bravery doesn't mean you have never failed or you are not afraid. It means you move forward despite the fear. Trust yourself." His words were like a spark, igniting the courage buried deep within her. That night, as the full moon rose high in the sky, Nandi grabbed a clay bowl. He stepped into the forest, its shadows stretching like dark arms around her. The forest was alive. The rustle of leaves in the wind, the distant hoot of an owl, and the soft growls of unseen predators filled the air. Every sound made her heart pound, but she pressed on, the moonlight guiding her path. Finally, she reached the river. Its surface shimmered like silver under the moon's glow. There, nestled by the water's edge, was the plant. Its yellow flowers seemed to glow faintly, as though they held a secret light within them. Relief washed over her, but before she could begin harvesting, a voice broke the silence. "Well, well, well," he said mockingly. "What are you doing here, Nandi?" She spun around to see Kofi stepping out from the shadows. His smirk was unmistakable. You think a few flowers will fix everything? He sneered. You are just a girl, plain Ela. Nandi straightened her back, meeting his gaze. Then go, she said simply. And for the first time, Kofi had no clever comeback. He stared at her, the smirk fading from his face. Then, without a word, he turned and disappeared into the forest. Nandi returned to the village with the precious plant. Under the watchful eyes of the villagers, she ground the flowers into a paste, mixing them carefully with herbs from her garden. The villagers gathered around her, watching with a mix of hope and doubt. You are playing with lives, Kofi said loudly, drawing a crowd. What if a remedy kills them faster? Nandi looked at him, her voice steady. You are right. There is a risk, but without this, they have no chance. Her courage silenced the crowd. With the elder's blessing, Nandi carried the remedy to the neighboring village. When Nandi arrived at the neighboring village, what she saw broke her heart. This is worse than I imagined, she said. The sick lay motionless on the mat, their breathing shallow. Nandi walked tirelessly, administering her remedy to each of them. Families sat nearby, their faces etched with despair. Hours passed. The villagers watched in tense silence. Slowly, the first signs of recovery began to appear. A child sat up. A mother smiled weakly. An elder's cough subsided. The village erupted in cheers. But there was one patient who hadn't improved, the chief's son. Nandi realized he needed more of the plants than she had brought. Without hesitation, she turned to the chief. I will go back and get more, she said. The chief's eyes filled with gratitude. It's too dangerous, he said. But Nandi was already on her way with hand-carved drums. The celebration was unlike anything the village had seen in years. A release of all the fear, sorrows that had gripped them for so long. At the center of it all stood Nandi. Her tall, graceful figure was illuminated by the firelight, and her beautifully patterned dress seemed to shimmer with every movement. Children clung to her hands, their small fingers gripping tightly as they looked up at her with a wide, admiring eyes. To them, she wasn't just Nandi anymore. She was a savior, a hero, someone whose bravery and wisdom had saved their world. One little girl, no older than 6, tugged at the hem of Nandi's dress. Auntie Nandi, she said softly, her voice barely audible over the music. Is it true that you went into the forest alone? Weren't you afraid? Nandi crouched down, meeting the girl's wide, innocent eyes. She gently brushed a strand of hair from the girl's face and smiled. Yes, I was afraid, she said, her voice warm and steady. But being brave doesn't mean you are never scared. It means doing what is right even when you are. The girl nodded solemnly, a small hand clutching Nandi's. Around them, other children gathered, their laughter and chatter like a melody of its own. As the night deepened, the crowd began to shift, creating a path. Kofi emerged from the shadows, his usually confident stride slower, more deliberate. The firelight danced across his face, illuminating an expression Nandi hadn't seen before: humility. He stopped a few steps away from her, lowering his gaze to the ground. The man who had once mocked her, belittled her, and laughed at her dreams now stood before her, visibly humbled. "I was wrong about you, Nandi," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "You are stronger than any of us, smarter than any of us. What you have done, no one else could have." For a moment, the crowd fell silent. All eyes were on Nandi, waiting to see what she would say. She tilted her head slightly, studying Kofi. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by sincerity. But instead of responding, Nandi simply smiled, a soft, knowing smile. She didn't need his words. She did not need anyone's validation. The truth was, she had proven her worth long before this moment. She had proven it to herself, and that was enough. As Kofi stepped back into the crowd, the drums picked up again, their rhythm louder and faster. Women began to dance, their skirts swirling like waves in the firelight. Men clapped their hands, chanting songs that spoke of courage, wisdom, and hope. Nandi took a step back, letting the celebration wash over her. She felt no need to stand at the center any longer. She had done what she was set to do, and her heart swelled with quiet pride. The children refused to leave her side. They danced around her, their laughter ringing out like bells. One boy, a little older than the others, tugged on her arm and said, "Auntie Nandi, will you tell us a story of the forest, of how you saved us?" Nandi laughed softly, kneeling to meet their eager faces. "Not tonight," she said gently. "Tonight is for dancing. But soon, I will tell you all about it. And maybe," she added with a playful twinkle in her eye, "one of you will grow up to be even braver than I was." The children cheered, jumping and spinning in excitement. Nandi stood again, letting their joy fill her soul. She turned her face towards the sky, where the stars shimmered like diamonds, scattered across a dark velvet cloth. Somewhere out there, her grandmother's spirit was surely watching, smiling with pride. Later that night, as the celebration quieted, Nandi sat under her baobab tree, writing in her journal. The stars above sparkled like the dreams in her heart. Her father approached her. "What will you do now, Nandi?" She smiled softly. "I will keep learning, Baba. There is so much more to discover." The story of Nandi spread far and wide, inspiring young girls and boys to value courage, wisdom, and the strength to follow their hearts. I hope you enjoyed the story. Thank you for watching to the end. What stood out to you the most? Is it Nandi's bravery, wisdom, or persistence? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to prove yourself, like Nandi? Or maybe you underestimated someone, like Kofi did? Share your thoughts in the comments. I would like to read them. Please like my video, share with your friends, and subscribe to my channel for more interesting tales. Thank